Development Authority. It's Thursday, April 11th, 2024. I would ask Callie, I'm so used to saying that. I'm sorry, Rachel and/or Brandy to note roll call. Announcements. The Community Development Authority Board will convene into closed session pursuant to section 19.851E of the Wisconsin statutes for purposes of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Tonight, negotiating an option to purchase the DeForest Car Wash Limited Liability Company. Item 4, approval of minutes from our March 14th, 2024 meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, edits, or corrections? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Do we have any appearances? Not that we're aware of. New business. Presentation and discussion on loan review process.
Yeah, so I believe we have Leah McDonald on the call from Heartland Credit Union, and at some point tonight, we may or may not have Tom Spitz from Settlers Best jumping on either virtually or in person. I know he's busy and scrambling to get here, but they are, in short, our loan review committee. So when we're doing, when we have an application coming in through the revolving loan program, they, as you know from our recent application, will do an analysis, and I have the document on screen here that they use to perform that analysis on a number of different fronts, and I'll let Leah probably talk a little bit through what they look at for that, and then provide that information to you all. And really tonight, I just wanted to give them the opportunity, to introduce themselves formally to you all, talk about how they approach looking at these applications, and then potentially answer any questions or see if there's any additional input beyond this limited financial review that you all would like to see. Ultimately, the decision is in your hands in executing these loan agreements. So we want to make sure that we're being responsive to that. And I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Leah.
Well, thank you all for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here and talk about this a little bit. It's been interesting as we reviewed this first application and just some of the questions and things that came up and how the board might want to handle them either similarly or potentially give different considerations than what we do here at the financial institutions when we take a look at credit risk. So to start with, my name is Leah McDonald. I am a business and agricultural lender at Heartland Credit Union. I've been in the lending space for about 15 years, and I have the good pleasure of working with you guys on this particular program. This particular worksheet that you're looking at here is something that we use internally, or it's a variation of it, to analyze some of our applications and an annual basis. And so I think this is a great way to get a general and consistent overview of what credit risk could look like for the borrowers that we're looking at. When we received the information for our first applicant, the information was a little bit different than what we typically receive for a loan application. So we got a balance sheet and some profit and loss information. Typically we get tax returns, and we were not able to pull credit in this particular instance because we weren't able to get the authorizations accordingly. I do believe that we are, and Alex, you can help me on this, but legal was working on updating the form so that in the future we can get that and pull credit. We need to make sure that anybody that we're pulling credit on, that we have authorization for each institution, because we can't just be pulling credit on people at random. There's accountability with those parts and pieces. So based on the last application, everything looked really good. I really didn't have any concerns from a credit risk perspective. When it came down to recommending terms, obviously the board gets to make their decisions and their final recommendations. But based on the feedback you received back to date, what questions might you have so far? And how can I help best to bring us all kind of to a level starting point?
Okay. We'll start with questions. I was just curious. So you need a signature from the applicant to pull credit? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Mhm.
When you pull credit on a business applicant, whose credit does that ding? I mean, you know,
We're
every,
pulling their personal credit reports. There isn't any way to pull a report for a business. So that's not something that we can do.
and you don't look for what is the company that gives the ratings for businesses,
That's not something that we use at Heartland. It's actually in a former life, I worked at a larger financial institution. And we didn't use it there either. And I know what rating scale you're referencing, and I cannot think of the name of it at the moment. So I do apologize.
Dun and Bradstreet.
Yes, but
Yes,
that isn't something that I've ever used as a reference in my career.
that's interesting. They used to pull that on my firm years and years and years ago. Okay, so is there things that we could do as a CDA to be of more help to you or to make better decisions as we start to get some of these applications?
I think it's potentially just having a good discussion and understanding of what the credit risk could be. These applications are relatively small in nature. So from that perspective, I think it's, you know, being mindful of what makes sense on a risk adjusted basis. So when we take a look at things here at the credit union, we're taking into consideration the size of the ask in comparison to the information that we collect. Does it look likely that that's going to be repaid? And what does our collateral look like? So one of the discussions we had with Alex was around the collateral itself. My understanding is that there's a tax lien that could potentially be filed if these loans were to become delinquent. But beyond that, we're not filing any mortgages or that kind of thing. So those were some of the discussions that we've had to date to just sort of, you know, what does the CDA want to put in place? How are you managing that risk? Those types of things.
Okay. Other questions? Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks for this. Couple of follow-up kind of questions. One, what would be the criteria, or what red flags would you be looking for to say this is not a good credit risk for us as CDA and you as the bank? That's one question.
Okay. Do you want to ask all your questions right away, or do you want to?
No, go ahead and answer that one.
Okay, fantastic. So the things we're going to be taking a look at are just what is the historical earnings of the business been? Do they have a historical record of having positive cash flow, or does it look like they've been filing losses and aren't able to cover their current obligations? So that's going to be key, and that's what we take as like our primary thought process when we analyze a risk. And I would think that the CDA would want to do the same. Secondarily,
Yes.
we want to take a look overall at what their balance sheet looks like. So do they own most of their business, or are they highly leveraged? And that obviously is a fallback. So if there isn't enough cash flow, then they've got some equity that they can potentially leverage to sort of liquidate some assets or different things to be able to employ some cash in that fashion. The last thing that we're looking for are like contingent liabilities. That's part of the reason that we want to pull credit, because we want to see what else is happening. What are their habits personally? A lot of times that is an indicator of character and how they're managing their business. Although they can be completely independent, and I've seen experiences and situations where that happens. We also take things with a grain of salt and take a good look. So if I'm pulling the credit bureau, for example, and I have somebody who has medical collections, that doesn't automatically tell me that that's a red flag, as particularly with a business. And the reason I say that is because sometimes they don't carry insurance for lots of reasons, and often it's just expensive personally. And so they've worked at, then it's following up. What do you have a payment plan? What does that look like? How does that affect the cash flow? If those things check out, we may proceed with the loan, and we often do at the credit union, but those would be things for the CDA to potentially take a look at. Now, we don't want to get into people's medical records. Obviously, that's all confidential, but it's just taking into consideration any potential judgments that might be out there. Similarly, we want to make sure that the insurance on the property is current so that we know that, hey, they have coverage if they have a fire or a flood or something crazy. I had one borrower at one point who had a plane fly into a building during the EAA air show. You can't plan for that stuff. So those are good things to make sure that they have insurance. And then the last thing is just making sure the property taxes are paid. And that's pretty simple. Obviously, you can just pull that from, or maybe it's not obvious for me. That's a daily or a normal task. So we pull those records off of the Dane County Access site, and those
Yeah.
are public records to be able to check.
Okay, that's really good information. The other question that I have, it's kind of a two-parter, but maybe not really. So I know you said that you pulled the personal credit information because there's not really a way to do a business. I'm assuming, you know what they say about assuming, but most of the businesses that we would be dealing with, I'm assuming, would be LLCs. Is that kind of a good assumption for the most part? Okay.
I wouldn't make any assumption that they could be, they can be
Yeah.
any type of entity, but
Yeah, that's
LLCs
true.
are most common.
Yeah. So when you said possible tax liens, so as far as the collateral that you would be requiring, what types of, and this is where I'm getting to, what types of collateral are you looking at? Physical property, real estate, or other types of collateral?
So for us at the credit union, it depends on the type of loan. For the CDA and this particular context, it will be the property itself, because that's going to be what you would have potential to have a lien against. Alex can potentially speak to a little bit further, but from what I understand, your ability to collect is based on then filing a real estate tax lien against the property. I'm not intimately familiar with that particular process.
So what we did in this first instance was we actually secured with a personal guarantee. So that's how we dealt with that in this instance.
So then how would you be able to collect down the road? Let's just say devil's advocate here, the worst case scenario, they default. It's a personal guarantee, but not like a potential lien on the property.
Right, yep, there
So
would,
how do you collect?
my assumption is that that person who provided the guarantee would be the individual that we would look to collect from. But, part of the reason why we didn't really look at anything on the properties in a mortgage or anything like that is we're talking about, in this case, $15,000.
Okay.
So, I think part of what we have to understand, or at least determine as a board, is what's our comfort level with these and really doing the work on the front end, because in the grand scheme of things, are we really gonna go after some of these in an instance of default? Maybe, but there's also the case where we might end up writing stuff off. So that's why the front end work is really important.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
And that
Speaking to the
was,
personal guarantee itself, if you don't mind. If you decide to collect on that, what you'll do is you'll have your attorney, they'll send a notice of default to the personal guarantors. And then they have a period of time that they can reply and respond to that right to cure, essentially. And then you would proceed to judgment from there with them if they don't make the loan whole at that point.
and the personal guarantor is not the loan applicant, right?
They could be one and the same.
Okay,
It depends on how the building is owned. So if it's an LLC and your loan is to the LLC, then the personal guarantee is usually the LLC members or owners.
please go ahead, Sheila.
I appreciate you saying that one of the criteria is that someone's not like leveraged, overly. Is there a reason that we don't have like criteria, like a percentage criteria that we're kind of shooting for here? I mean, everything else has kind of the criteria, but that doesn't.
So I-
Actually,
Yeah, go
Oh, go
ahead,
ahead.
Leah.
Tom and I have a pretty consistent like baseline of what we're comfortable with within our internal parameters, but that's something that the CDA would need to recommend. Typically within lending, you do not want to see an owner equity below 35%. And that is on a cash basis. If they're on an accrual basis, you have to take into account the difference between market value and depreciation and the depreciated value, and that can get complex. But just recognizing that there's a difference there, and then your equity percentages are typically different.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And then is there a target with the pass fail? Is that something we just kind of look at pass fail and then go from there? Or is there no more than
Those are set
half
on
or?
those are set on Heartland's internal parameters. So like a credit score less than 640 to us is unacceptable. So that results in a fail. Insurance that is not current results in a fail. Property taxes that are not paid results in a fail. You can override those things internally, but what it reminds us to do is a more thorough exam. So it's asking those next level questions and then determining what we're comfortable with as a credit risk. The CDA is going to want to do the same if we run into those types of things. The other thing that would be nice, and I don't know if Alex, if this is something that you want to do, but do you want to have a date of last inspection? So for us internally, we have to have eyes on the property at least once a year. It's just a good double check to say, hey, that building still looks good. Or, oh, that really looks like it needs some maintenance and things. It's just a good early indicator of things. So I don't know if you want to have somebody physically look at these buildings prior to, giving a yes. Most of them are obviously going to be pretty easy to take a look at. They're all going to be kind of in the same area, but that would be a recommendation.
So it's set up to, if you get one fail, that fails the whole thing. Is that the intent? But then this one, I remember you talking about that
Yep.
that one wasn't.
Right, so for the first one that we had come in here, obviously the data last inspection failed. Although, because technically I didn't go out there and visit the site, drive by it every day. But in kind of using that as an example of the kind of criteria that we could look at, that was one of the ones that failed. So, it's a new program. So the questions that you're asking are part of why I invited Leah to come here tonight, is to get some input into, are there certain parameters that we would like to set? Ultimately, the role of the loan review committee and Tom and Leah is to perform their analysis. Obviously, they have their criteria, deliver that information to us. If we have, parameters that we want to review that under, we're certainly able to do so. So, I think those are the questions that you're asking are the ones that are good ones for us to think about and determine, do we want a hard line somewhere, or is it, where we're taking the information that's presented to us and evaluating that on a case by case basis. Those are all great questions.
One of the things that strikes me as we're talking about this, we have to remember that some of these applicants may not be able to get traditional financing, and they're coming to us for, special consideration of a loan. So we might want to be looking at this a little different than if they were going to the bank for $100,000 to purchase something, or $500,000 to purchase a house, or whatever it might be. It's a little different situation. We do want to encourage people to spiff up their businesses and to participate in the program. Other questions? Rebecca?
So exactly what, I mean, other than this presentation, which was very informative, what do you need from us tonight, if anything? Or are these questions that we're asking helping to guide you to maybe come up with a more concise list that you can then present to us?
I think, is it okay if I go, Alex?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I don't want to talk over anyone. For me personally, at the end of the day, this is your process. So I'm here to help facilitate and use my expertise to help guide you in the best way possible. This is the framework from which we started because it was something that I had on file and established, and it works for us internally, which is great. Recognizing at the end of the day, this is your loan program to administer. So if you determine as a board that you would like to modify this, it is a dynamic worksheet, and it can be modified to meet the parameters that you would like. The questions and the final decisions are yours at the end of the day. So Tom and I are here to give you some guidance as to what we look at as a financial institution, and some expertise. If there are some that are a little bit sticky, maybe for those in particular, you would want, if Tom and I are like, this one has some hair on it, those kinds of things, then that might be something where you want us to be present to be able to have a discussion. But for those that are very straightforward, that first application was very easy. Both Tom and I would have done that in a heartbeat. So that one was very straightforward and easy underwriting. They may not all be quite that strong.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of that, I guess, most of it was just to kind of open the playbook, so to speak, so you can see what goes into this. Certainly, if there are any alterations that you'd like to see on this, whether that is looking at, I wrote it down, Dunn Street and Bradbury, is something that we consider a business report type of thing. I'm not sure if Tom and Leanne could, or Leanne, Tom and Leah could do that, but certainly we could talk about whether there are things that you want to hear. Alternatively, from a process standpoint, we could continue on the road that we've been going, take this information, and then, if there are, like Leah said, if there are applicants or applications that have a little bit more hair on them, we could dig deeper into the analysis. So it's really at your discretion in terms of how you'd like to see this develop from a process standpoint.
And that's kind of where I am, to stay where we are, and then as we get applications, decide if it's working or not.
Sure.
Rebecca?
I'm kind of in that same vein also. I guess one other question I have is, do we have a criteria? And I don't think we do. I don't know that we want to, but I'm just asking, of how long they've been in existence for. The reason why I'm asking that is, and I'm not saying that anybody necessarily who applied to this would be doing this, but there are fraudsters out there. And I think here in the forest, we're small enough that, enough people know enough people that we can verify the authenticity of pretty much anybody that would apply to this. But there are bad people that will take advantage of programs like this. And I want to make sure that we protect ourselves from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at the program application here, I do believe we do have we request information or have a period in which a business has to be in existence for 3 years of business or personal. I can send you the terms of that, but I'm pretty sure that we have some of that stuff in there.
And everyone knows this is the assessment form, but we have an application form with a lot more information, so, yep.
Alex, can
Okay,
you remind me, do all of the applicants own their buildings, or are some of them leasing them?
So no, in the instance of if there's somebody leasing them, we require the property owner themselves to submit on behalf of that tenant.
I think that's your offset of your fraud, because if they physically hold title to the building and you've verified that they hold title to the building, they have it.
good point, Leah. Good. Okay. Other questions? This has been helpful. I think we were all kind of in the dark about some of this, so we appreciate it. And we appreciate your spending part of your early evening with us, Leah.
No problem.
Welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or provide any other comments you want to provide. Otherwise, we'll move forward on the agenda.
Thanks for having me. I'll probably log off. If you do have other questions, feel free to reach out. And I look forward to working with you folks on the program as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have someone? Okay. The next item is the quarterly update on from Prudential Securities.
All right, Josh Satzer here, Prudential Advisor, 25 years here in the area. Thank you again for allowing us to continue to help with the investment accounts. Myself, my partner Adam Klimas, who you've probably seen on Zoom before, have been handling the account for the last few years. Just kind of giving you a summary in addition to, where you see the account at now, a little bit over 1.1 million. When we made the transition to the managed account back in November, that was at 1,021,000 and change. And it's benefited from the market run up as well as a good mix of moderately conservative investments on that front. Just a couple thoughts related to that. We are starting to scale back a little bit on some of the more aggressive stocks. Well, there was not many aggressive stocks in the mix, slightly in preparation for some volatility within election year. We'll typically have a little bit more volatility. We're not anticipating the year to end on a negative note or that front. However, typically after an election, there's a lot of volatility, potentially positive or negative on the short term. The one thing people, sorry about that. One thing people should be reminded of 1 year later after an election, there's no correlation. I'll just talk about it. No, I'll just talk about it. So there's really no correlation, positive or negative 1 year later after an election, no matter what happens on the short term. So a lot of times in the short term, you'll see some volatility in investments. We could see a downturn, we could see a big uptick. But if you look 1 year down the road, historically, there's never any correlation one way or another, whether a Republican or Democrat gets elected as president. It's just a much more volatile time. The other thing that's unique now is the higher interest rate environment we're in, and we're watching the Federal Reserves and their moves on interest rates, holding most bond positions completely steady until there's a more coherent appearances presented on the what the Federal Reserve would do. Overall, again, our account is very safe, well diversified, built for the long haul. As we've seen, importance of patience in investing. 2022 was a very rough year. Brought account values down for all of us personally in a lot of cases, as well as the account here. But weathered that storm just fine, and now has hit higher levels than it's been. So, any other thoughts or questions?
Rebecca?
I always have questions. No, I was really, as I was mentioning out in the hallway, I was really pleased with how this has been moving up here. We're back well over where we used to be, and I'm very happy about that. One question I guess I do have is related to, I know this is what you were talking about, the potential volatility, then the bonds versus stocks, blah, 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 depending on what the feds do. And how do you determine, or so the types of things that we're invested in, is it more bonds, more stocks, a combination?
Because of the risk tolerance of the account being moderately conservative, we're always going to be in a higher level of bonds
Okay.
versus stocks, because we just don't want to take the inherent risk that 100% stock portfolio would give you, because in a tough time, you're likely to see a 20% decline in the overall value if you were 100% in stocks. And no one would want to see that. And once you have that 20% decline, you need a 40% gain to make that back. So typically in your portfolio, you're going to see somewhere between 35 to 40% in stocks at the high side. And then just the type of stock, so that, and it isn't going to be changed a whole lot, because, you always want to have that sound diversification no matter what. The thing that you just have to watch out for, and some of these things during times of more volatility, aggressive stocks could potentially get hit, 30-40% during a period of time, and you want to be a little bit sheltered from some of those things during a period like this. And Adam, my partner, he works closely with the team that, is helping him design
Okay.
that mix. And, very well diversified, as you'll see from the statements. There's a lot of different holdings, a lot of different companies, Invesco, BlackRock, the list goes on and on. So, and, my time in the industry, I've seen 2000 to 2002, 2008, 2018, 2022. So they've seen a lot of times where, there's temporary downturns. The key during those times is solid diversification and patience. And
Okay.
again, living through 2022 most recently, you can see in the account value how patience pays off, as well as a sound diversification, where you're never too aggressive, especially during those times.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Other thought I do, I passed a couple of my folders, newsletters on there. Might be something you're interested in reading, just to help your overall knowledge, being the end of tax season and that sort of thing on a personal level. Little pens in there, it's food for thought. So if anybody ever wants personal advice, feel free to check into. My office is down in Token Creek now, so I'm kind of right in your backyard.
Okay. Doug has a question.
Thank you for your work on this. Just for my information, now that it's a managed account, how often do you and Adam actually put like eyes on our account?
Adams has eyes on it daily. I myself about approximately monthly, and he and a team that are doing those. So that team at the InvestNet, which is we just use the advisor under there, working together. And InvestNet's on it every day. I can't say that Adam's in there looking every day, but he's working with that team. And obviously it's on our list of accounts. We see the value daily. From that standpoint too. And so it's not something that's being ignored. Does it need to be micromanaged? Not necessarily, because by nature, ETFs, the bonds that we're in, are very, very well diversified. Is there some good things about having the extra layer of management? Yes, because before, the funds were good, but it was, a fund that was pretty stagnant as far as being able to be moved and so forth. And that wasn't a bad thing. It just, this is a level you deserve, and a level that's appropriate based upon the amount of money, based upon the, diversification and all the tools available. So.
Thank you.
Renee, I just want to make sure you can hear Josh. Okay. The reason we use microphones as much as we do is the Zoom people.
Right.
Okay, other questions? I think we're all just glad to be over the hump from last year.
Yeah, and just remember that, those humps come and go. We could go back again. Nobody knows the exact future, but as long as we stay the course, have a solid diversification like we do, we'll always be okay.
My financial advisor will call in and say, just don't open the envelope.
That's the
look.
best advice during those times. 2022,
Yeah.
just don't look. And if you have a good advisor on your side, and the time's right to look, and be pleasantly surprised typically.
Yeah, yep. All right, other questions? This is very, very helpful when you come and talk to us. I think it gives us a feeling of confidence.
Sure, and I think, being here in person twice a year probably is a good game plan if that's okay with your front. I mean, getting Alex updates quarterly and obviously statements come out monthly, would be good. And probably being here shortly before the election, if an October meeting is probably a good time, if that's
Okay,
right. I can plan to be here again then.
does that work? It works for all of us, so
Okay.
thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
We appreciate your coming out on this very nice day. All right, item 6.3, resolution 2024-504, accepting the lowest qualified bid and awarding a contract for the demolition and construction of a retaining wall in Jefferson Square. Excuse me.
So this has been probably a year-long process or so. We initially started out getting bids from the contractor we use for lawn care and snow removal over at Jefferson Square. He started his business based off building walls like this. So his initial bid was $25,000 for the project. So that's what we based the budget off of in a previous year. As part of mostly Alex's ongoing priority for making our processes really better. And following in more line with the village, we went and got public bids. Those came in significantly higher than we expected. So the bid initially was between 40, I think the lowest one was 42,000. The highest one was about 73. So at that point, we just kind of paused, took a step back, kind of looked around and kind of got more serious about it. And that's when we started involving Veerbecker. We had them come out, take a look at the wall and basically give us plans so we could go out to bid using solid plans that everybody could bid off of. From there, we put it out to bid. We got three bids. Six people looked at it, 3 people bid. The lowest bid was $73,242, and I believe the highest one was 90 something.
$90,653.50.
So we chose the lowest qualifying bid. It was Always Contractors. Veerbecker reached out and notified them pretty promptly. So that's the one we're recommending tonight.
Where is this wall?
It's in between 734, that's Joan Dara, and 752, Burt Willis just moved in there. So it's kind of on the southeastern side of Jefferson Square. I'll put it up here. It sort of supports a walkway, and there's a large difference between the two buildings. So the one on the north, yeah, right there. The one on the north is probably a good 8 feet taller, sits 8 to 10 feet taller than the lower one. And the retaining wall has always been there. It's been replaced once. The last time it was replaced, the insulation probably wasn't the best. There's not a lot of backfill so that the water can drain properly. A lot of the drain tile on either side are actually pitched upwards, so it's pretty clear that the water is just sitting in that corrugated stuff. Veerbecker did a good job making sure that our specs are kind of meant for long term instead of the black corrugated stuff. We're using Schedule 40 PVC and stuff like that, so it should hold up a lot better. In addition to one part of the bid process was kind of straightening the path, that saved us a bit of money, and it kind of made it a little bit quicker. So the path won't be as curved. It'll straighten out a little bit more. And you know, the block we chose, we had 2 choices between block. It was a really large block and a smaller block. They didn't seem to have a preference, the engineers. They said both would service just fine. So I reached out to the contractor and I basically said, what are you more comfortable installing? Because they would probably end up with a better job. So they said the small block is something they work with the most. So that's what we went with.
I guess I've never noticed that wall there before. Yeah.
Top part's leaning pretty good right now. When we inspected it, it was part of the memo. When we inspected it, the bottom was okay, but it was started to lean, and we just figured, you know, I mean, it didn't make any sense to just replace the top when the bottom might need to be replaced in 10 years or so, and we'd have to take the top off anyway. So better to just do it all and get it all done properly the first time.
So where is this money coming from?
So we have, so we had a resident just move into 752 Jefferson Court. With his buy-in, the 25% of the buy-in that goes towards the reserve and replace account, we have $301,000 in there. After we pull about 74,000 out for the wall, we'll have 228,000 left. So the reserve account will bear the cost, and it's Alex and I took a look at the 30-year plan. It all falls into schedule. Jay and I met with the landscape committee yesterday. We typically set aside about $20,000 for just landscape upkeep and modifications, and we're not touching most of that this year. The contract we have for concrete came in under budget, and then we're gonna have Jay do a lot more grinding this year instead of hiring out lifting, which could save us about $10,000. So we're doing what we can to snip away to compensate, but this is a little bit higher than we had expected.
Doug, and then Rebecca.
Can we pull up the pictures that were in the back of the wall so everybody can see it?
It should be in the memo.
Page 2. So I'm really shocked at how much quotes came in at for this type of project. Granted, I haven't put up a wall in decades, but are you confident that, I I mean, what are they all gonna do here that's gonna justify $70,000?
So I think the biggest thing is we were really worried about the structural integrity of the house that this sits on. We didn't want to create a situation where we hired someone that, maybe wasn't as reputable as the people that Veerbecker attracts. So that was the number one thing is soil retention to keep that top building up, and then drainage for the bottom building. So that's going to be much improved. We do have some issues right now with some of the drain tile has caved in. They're going to remedy a lot of that. They're going to run drain tile all the way to the storms. If you scroll up a little bit, there's a storm drain over here where the yellow dot is. So they're going to run drain tile all the way over there so that we're not creating like an erosion field and stuff like that. The other thing is from these pictures here, you can see that where this grass is, there is no backfill. So all that dirt is constantly getting heavy and pushing against the wall. So they're going to take a lot of that out and then backfill it with stone to make it so that it drains properly. They're going to have the drain tile behind the block pitched correctly and everything like that. They're going to have weep holes so that it can come out the way that it should. And then, a lot of the stuff is, I suppose another thing is the fence. So the chain link fence is going to go, we're going to improve that. It's not very strong right now. That's leaning too. We've had people fall into it and push into it, and then the caps are falling off the fence themselves. So
I was gonna ask about that, if there's gonna be a different type of railing put in.
yeah, so it'll be, Veerbecker gave us some recommendations. Jay and I went and looked at existing fences to see what we liked the most. And we looked at the one off of Russell Street where they did that retaining wall around the curve over there when they just redid that street. And that's the one we picked. It's vinyl, it's really low maintenance. I leaned against it pretty heavily to make sure it would hold up against someone falling, and it seems to be pretty good. And I think it'll really improve the aesthetic too, rather than just a chain link fence.
Okay, and what kind of time frame?
I believe November 30th is the deadline this year. That helped us keep the price lower because then it allowed the contractor to be more flexible. That's something Veerbecker recommended.
Okay, thanks.
Rebecca?
So that answered part of my questions. I guess part of my other questions, well, I guess the reason for the fence is just because there is that additional drop down. So with these, with this reconstruction, basically, first off, is this going to affect the sidewalk? Second off, with the redirection of the draining and this backfill over on on the left there, how will that affect the house on the right that's a little bit lower as far as water? Have they been having any kind of water infiltration problems?
Not that I know of. Actually, it's kind of in this bottom right picture. This is, if you can see my cursor, yeah.
Mhm.
That's kind of where we've seen the most problems. So over there, that's where a lot of the soil has been sucked into the drain tile and carried away. We've actually had to go in and fill it with rock. People put bird feeders on it so that it's not, so that they know not to step there, things like that, because it's been a hazard up until this point. Surprisingly, that patio's in pretty good shape. It's not cracked as far as I know. It has lifted a little bit, so it's starting to pitch back towards the building. And as far as the sidewalk goes, they are going to have to demo it and then reinstall it after the wall's
So
complete.
that's part of that cost.
Yep.
So then taking off on that, as far as the one patio, possibly the other patio, is that a second patio? Yeah, well, the picture on the left,
So this,
down, not that one, down there, right there. Is that a patio?
yes,
Or, okay. So has that one been affected by all of this?
not much. No.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, because we do have, and I'm not sure who's living in those, if they have any kind of like a disability, would the pitch, would that be an issue for them? And is that something we potentially need to take care of?
We just did the age verification survey. She is one of our older residents, so she doesn't get out on the patio much. However, what we've run into in some of these situations is the patio heaves up and it prevents the door from opening, which is a fire escape. So usually we take those pretty seriously, and that's primarily what we're doing this year is replacing patios and one driveway that is safety concerns. So that's our biggest concern there is that the fire exit and it needs to perform well. In the past, when we haven't been able to afford the concrete, we usually just take the door off, the storm door, but obviously that's not ideal either.
So do you guys have any kind of idea, plan, time frame for when we might need to do something about that?
So I believe the patio is going to get demoed because
As part of this?
correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just to get equipment in there and stuff like that, it's going to get wrecked. So the plan is to demo it, and then they'll re-pour it afterwards with the proper pitch and grade and base.
So then that might even help with that area of the grass. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. Other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Is there a
Second.
second?
A second.
And we have a second. All right. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. When was Jefferson Square built?
It was built in 3 phases, I believe 91, 92, and 93 were
Okay.
the timeframes each section was built.
Okay. It just seems like there's a lot of cement issues and it surprises me.
And I've definitely noticed that it's by section. So I don't know if a certain section was poured in the winter and that's not performing as well for whatever reason. But there are certain sections that do better than others. And this is an area where some side of it does well and the other side of it doesn't. So, and there is a lot of.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 6.4, discussion and potential action on submission of grant application to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services Livable Communities Program.
Yeah, so this is a late addition to the agenda. You can see this is a program where the application is due on Monday. So that's why I kind of came here. And if you're wondering why this has come to the CDA, so initially when Natalie, who's the director of Cornerstone Community Center, reached out, Zach and I both met with her. Zach obviously having the connection with our elderly population of all of our housing facilities. And 509 being right next to the center, thought it'd be a logical opportunity to partner on something powerful for our elderly community in DeForest in general. One of the things that we were looking to potentially look at was that first bullet point there, a revolving loan program to make aging in place improvements to existing homes, which would have been a really nice fit for CDA. We did get feedback since this was added to the agenda that wouldn't be eligible because technically we couldn't expend, it wouldn't constitute an expenditure of the funds by March 31st of next year because it would sort of be an ongoing thing. So unfortunately, we won't be looking at that. However, Zach and I did meet with Ms. Ramish this afternoon to talk about other ideas. And so while we won't be taking action on anything today, I think it would be with your support, it would be nice to maybe contribute a letter of support to their submission. And what they're thinking of doing is submitting an application to, obviously a lot of our residents use the center as well. So certainly to the degree that we can support this, I'd like us to consider throwing some weight behind that too, is solicit grant funds for planning efforts to sort of comprehensively plan the footprint of their entire facility here. Right now, there's a lot of access issues. Some of their parking and entrance areas are a little bit convoluted. But additionally, what they've been wanting to do and what is part of the intent of the program itself is to create more outdoor spaces for their residents, for programming, for exercise, for different kinds of events, engagement, stuff like that. And in partnership with, what was it called? There's a partnership with the school district and some younger individuals who go over there and do work with the seniors. Linkages, that's what it's called, linkages, to potentially contribute as a as I guess, a co-sponsor or a partner on some of those activities as well. So it is an interesting project that they're looking at. Hopefully we can help them secure funding for it. And ultimately, I guess I would be asking not for action, but to see how you all would feel about throwing a CDA letter of support to this application.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a go.
Okay.
I don't know if I've ever seen this aerial view quite like it
Yeah.
before, but the junkyard
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
next door.
You don't really see it.
What is it?
from V.
Right. Well, I will have to say from Highway V, you don't see it. That's good. But I was looking at that and I was like, oh my God, I
That's
didn't
where the
realize we had
unpaid-
that. Is there any kind of incentive program we can give them?
Are they a commercial property in redevelopment area A?
I have no idea.
Pretty darn close.
They are.
Hmm.
They could paint the brown house that, boy, I get calls on that all the time.
Sure.
Back to this, though, I did just have a quick question. I noticed the bullet point 3, making pedestrian access improvements. Is that what she's wanting to do? Is apply for this loan for something like that? Is that what you were describing?
So not directly.
Yeah,
when-
and I'm assuming she's going to be, or they,
Yep,
excuse me,
community-
they're
yep,
going to be.
Cornerstone will be
applying
the
for this.
applicant. So when we were initially discussing that as an option with the potential of our facilities relocating, thought conceivably it might be nice to have some connections, pedestrian improvements going farther south on Main Street. In general, it also connects to the rest of the community. When we were talking in practicality about what that might look like, we were kind of at a loss into what we would apply for. I did connect with Judd, Director of Public Services, to talk about that a little bit further, because I know there is some planned improvements to that intersection, as well as a trail that I think will be installed on Highway V within the next year and a half. And I don't think they're planning to do, well, they're not planning to do lights or anything of that nature. It's more just from
Like
my
a flashing
understanding. Yep, it could potentially entail some of
crosswalk.
that, but maybe some roadway improvements as well. So
Okay.
nothing of the nature where we felt a contribution through this grant program would significantly enhance the crossing ability of
Okay.
that. You know, obviously it's a four-way stop right now.
Okay.
But that's kind of where we're thinking. However, I will say that with some of the planning activities that could come out of envisioning the rest of this space, you know, if they were to solicit the work of, the services of a consultant to look at this, I'm sure that they may make mention of connectivity to the rest of the community and may have some suggestions in that way as well.
And out of curiosity, I mean, I know we have the 509 that's right behind there.
Mhm.
I know we've had some on and off discussions about what might eventually happen to that. Have they ever expressed any
Cornerstone?
interest?
No, not to me.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking in terms of, I mean,
Sure.
it's right there.
Yep.
Um,
I haven't approached them about it either. I would think financially that might
It'd
be.
probably be
a
too
bit-
much for them.
Yeah,
And you
not
wanna
just
pay
from a
for it.
purchasing
No,
standpoint.
I
but
don't want to
also
pay for it.
From a maintenance standpoint as
We
No,
well.
I want us to sell it so that we can actually.
Can I interject? Because historically, the senior center or community center did look at a potential plan to expand into that property in the future. The unfortunate thing is that the way the property currently is built now does not comply with our current ordinances, so it's a non-conforming use. And to build there would be or rebuild there would be difficult because of the river that's there. So.
Thank you. Anything else on this? If not, please draft a letter. We'll sign it.
Absolutely.
Alleyway improvement update.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the alleyway to happen.
Yep, so I'll just pull this up here. I won't play the whole video again, but I have this as a visual reference just so we can recall what this all was supposed to look like. Did have a conversation with Greg Hall over in Public Services about moving forward with acquiring the posts as well as the lights, the string lights that are up there. He did point me to their supplier that they normally use throughout the village for the tables and chairs. So we're looking to put in an order for those relatively soon here. And also, kind of excitingly, he's offered to have, he's voluntold some of his team that they will be, which I think they'll enjoy, building the planter that you see here along the library side. And the thought that they're hoping to go with is rather than having one continuous planter here, it'd be nice to add some additional seating in there. So have one structure which has built-in benches tied into the planters all the way across that whole thing. So it'd be like a 4-foot section, then an 8-foot section, a 4-foot section, and an 8-foot section.
Nice.
Thought there would be it'd be a little bit less to maintain of the plants as well. And then, so that's sort of the structural pieces that we'll be purchasing as well as installing over the next, well, probably by, I probably shouldn't put a date to it, but I'll say June 15th, weather permitting,
We're gonna hold you to it.
right? Well, it'd be great to have all that stuff in place for the summer season, obviously. I think the biggest holdup for that is probably going to be ordering the tables and chairs just from a shipping standpoint. Last I checked, they were 6 to 8 weeks out. So,
And Alex,
Yeah.
Also, I believe that with the planters and benches that they're gonna be building, it's gonna be with
yes,
the repurposed wood,
Oh, nice.
like we have with the Village Public Works Building. So it's nice to take that.
Yeah.
The trees we had to take down and repurpose them, so.
yep. And, all of that also helps our budget a little bit too. So that's helped to bring down costs. The last piece of the puzzle here, well, there's 2 last pieces, I guess, one of which is not shown, is those shade sails. And the thought was that we would go through a summer and see if they're needed. And if they are needed, we could also determine the appropriate locations for those. And then you can kind of see these ground mounted and not building mounted art panels was the direction that we received from the community. We're still going back and forth, and I'll probably work with Stacy Harmon, the community ambassador, on trying to get some sort of a public engagement campaign surrounding those art pieces. So rather than going out and I'm paying for artists, or going out to bid for artwork, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to engage local arts groups, either at the high school or who knows where.
That'd be
So
lovely.
that's the skinny on the alleyway.
Wonderful questions, Rebecca.
Just a quick one. So on the bench part, any way we can get a dragon theme carved into it?
Get a what?
A dragon theme carved into it,
Oh,
or burned into it, yeah.
I will make a note of that. My wood carving skills are not that good.
But you could maybe have the artwork be dragon themed.
that's
I was gonna ask if you're thinking permanent artwork or rotating artwork.
Yeah, so the feedback that we received in the surveys through this was rotating. So those panels would be interchangeable. So that, again, to me, that lends itself perfectly to different kinds of public engagement campaigns.
great. Renee?
I just was gonna push a little bit. You said hopefully June 15, the Dragon Arts Fair
Oh, that's right.
would be really nice to have at least most of it done or have it at a good stopping point by then, which is, I just looked it up, June 1, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is June 1st.
Good
Mhm.
point, Renee.
I'll put the screws on.
I did have one other question too, just on the furniture, whether it's heavy enough that someone can't walk away with it.
Yeah, so we did talk about that. There's a couple different options that you can go with. Some of them can be mounted, physically mounted to the ground with bolts, basically. That would present an issue in the winter when we take those off with potentially plowing and just damaging either equipment or knocking those bolts off. So we did look at the stuff that they order was like 300 pounds or something like that. And all the chairs would be built into these benches. So it'd be
Mhm.
one unit, so you couldn't really walk off with an individual chair. It's all one large thing.
Awesome.
So while I guess anything is always possible, we are trying to keep that in mind too. I will say that each of these benches will also have ADA compliance.
Just what I was going to ask.
Yep, which is a nice feature too.
Yep. Yep.
Very cool.
Well, this is exciting. Maybe if we can offer to buy pizza or something for the builders so we can encourage them to.
I'm gonna try to get in on the crew. Anytime I can use somebody else's tools, I'm all about it.
Okay, how about section 18?
Section 18, so I think the last time that we had this discussion, we had the approval letter, but there were some corrections that I was hoping could get made. The most important of which was the determination of whether or not the transaction would take place at fair market value. Because if the way that HUD was looking at it in the approval letter, again, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, so CDA creates an LLC they use the term dispose of, to disposition the facilities to, essentially they buy it. We had that as a seller's note. They felt that that transaction was below fair market value because of the seller's note. Going back and forth with them, and they've been pretty responsive, which has been really good and apparently rare.
Yes.
They want to see this take place as a cash transaction. And I think, I'm trying to recall, I think the last time that we talked about it, we said there were a couple options, one of which would be to use the agreement that we had with the village in place already to request funds to then make that a cash transaction. Another would be to enter into a new agreement with the village. And then a third option would be to source funds from somewhere else, which I'll talk about here in a second, because I think that's the option that I would prefer to go, but that's open for discussion here. Since then, I sent an email back to HUD saying, hey, can we do this? They said, yes, sure, you can transfer fund to the LLC. And then as long as, they're paying for the building, that's fine. We'll likely issue a reapproval letter. So can you send that to me in an email so that I have that narrative in place? I sent that over. I'm waiting for a response. If all goes well, we'll hopefully be on the other side of this. But in the interim, if they do say that all goes well, we have to figure out where the cash is going to come from to give the LLC. I spoke with Carol, who, I don't know if she's still on here. Yep. Spoke with Carol today about some of the options that we have internally, one of which is, okay, so where are our sources of funds? One is our investment account, which we just heard about today. It's highly likely, especially now that we're also in a managed account, that we would incur costs to withdraw funds from that to then go fund this other activity. So probably not the best option. Another option where we have funds is in our buyout reserve from Jefferson Square liability account, and that's, I think, sitting at 1.8 million. The transaction itself would be $457,000. And the money we have to clarify how long this would take. In an ideal world, it would be a same day, almost instant transaction where the funds are changing hands and then coming back. Talking with Carol, I would want to run that by the auditors first to see what concerns they have. Carol and I also discussed timing of that, just from an accounting standpoint, and then also being concerned with our internal policies. In my opinion, I don't see why any of our policies would not allow us to do that. But ultimately, I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that route. Assuming that you all are, the next step would be then to actually go through that process, which probably wouldn't happen for a while because we still have an approval to go through. And again, I'd be trying to get it the same day transaction, but at most it maybe takes a month for it to go, maybe a couple weeks. Maybe Carol can weigh in a little bit more accurately than I can on that. But another potential consideration there is after I get direction from you as to whether or not that's okay, I will probably reach out to the Milwaukee field office because from my understanding, before I was here at the village, there was in the initial application with section 18, there was some concerns coming from the Milwaukee field office about Jefferson Square and its status from a solvency standpoint because of the buyout liability. So I would want to run all this by the Milwaukee field office, which is a totally separate branch of HUD than the SAC who is issuing our approvals, just to say, hey, is this going to dig up anything and do we need to do something different? So
That was
that's a
a-
lot of words, but
That was a huge issue. And we spent a long time trying to convince them that Jefferson Square and 509 were separate entities within this organization. And that the liability that Jefferson Square had shouldn't impact 509. And I don't know if that'll come back to bite us. If we try to move the money this way, there's a lot of paper trail on that, I would think. You remember this too, Zach, you're shaking your head. It was not pretty. And we didn't fully understand why they were penalizing us with it. The other part of it is, this money that we're putting in is so that we can then sell the building? Explain to me what that sale does.
so the reason that the sale at fair market value is really important for us is because without that, then if we were to go to eventually sell 509 and the duplexes, it would have to be it would have to come with a use restriction, meaning it would have to be used as operated as affordable housing for it's either a 15 or a 30-year term. So it would come with that restriction, which would essentially mean either we continue to operate those, to own and operate those, and we don't disposition them. We find a buyer who would continue to operate them in that fashion, or, well, that's about it.
And we don't want to continue to operate them. So this is essentially buying us out of the HUD program.
This is essentially making it so that we can continue with the process that we've envisioned in the way that we've envisioned it.
For Section 18.
Yep.
Right, okay. I just want to be clear. That's my understanding, but I want to be clear. Rebecca?
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're talking about as far as where the money's coming from, and where it's going to. Because I heard a little bit of magic there.
It's less magical than I made it sound, I'm sure.
I'm sure. And I think I understood. Now you tell me if I actually did understand. So you had mentioned something about using the investment fund. And I had a question on that is, I thought that was somehow tied to Jefferson Square. So how could we, and then we talk about this other stuff and the paper trail and all that stuff. And I'm like,
I know.
I see that as a complete and utter nightmare that would be questionable. But as far as, let's put that one aside. What exactly, can you explain it to me as though I'm a 5-year-old and I don't understand anything about finances, which I do, but this
Yeah.
one's really convoluted.
It is convoluted, and I think, I don't want to you said put that one aside, but I don't want to put that aside because I think it's important, an important distinction what you're just saying too. So the investment funds are associated with Jefferson Square 100%. The buyout coverage liability account is also associated with Jefferson Square 100%. But ultimately, and this may have been, I was telling Carol, I think this probably could have been an issue with HUD, why Jefferson Square became an issue. Jefferson Square is not an independent entity, right? So there's no LLC for Jefferson Square. There's nothing. Jefferson Square is not an independent entity. It's a development that we manage. The CDA is the entity. So these funds are all CDA funds. They're associated with a project that we own and operate, but they're not funds that are in the hands of another entity. So
Thank
that's
you for
one
that
piece. of it.
clarification, because I never really understood that.
And I imagine, my guess is that that's probably why Jefferson Square might have gotten lumped into the initial Section 18 stuff. I think our attorneys, from my understanding, did a good job at quashing that because we never heard back from them and it hasn't come up to date. And I've had numerous conversations with the field office, so I think we're fine. But if we do go this route, I want to at least say, hey, is this okay? Without alluding to all of the past stuff, just to be double and triple sure. But to answer the second part of your question, how does this whole process look? Essentially, in this case, it would be CDA giving funds to, in a transaction, providing funds to the LLC that we control, which we've already stood up. I think we created this 3 years ago, probably. That LLC purchasing our properties in that same amount and essentially giving those funds right back, and we put them right back where they came from. I
Okay,
don't know
that
why we
makes
have to
better
do it this
sense
way,
now.
but
That makes better sense now.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of what you were talking about, but it was clear as mud to me when you first said it. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Sure.
So. Nishant,
So Alex, you talked about checking with the auditors to make sure, like, how long will that take? What does the process look like? Like, and who will lead that from our side?
to check with the auditors.
Yeah, like.
So that would either be an email from myself or Carol. Carol, what would you think that would take time-wise? I imagine probably a day or two.
Yeah, it shouldn't take long to get a response from the auditors. I think it's more just a matter of how much time it will take them to research everything that all the information Alex has on what exactly is being required of us. So I mean, it will take them a little time to review and just make sure they understand the process that needs to happen. But then I don't expect it to take them long to get back to us.
And I have all the communications with HUD that I will gladly pass along so that they could see exactly the steps that have taken place to get to this point.
okay. I saw Zach kind of shivering and I'm shivering, and I'm glad to hear you say this because this makes sense. But it was beat into our heads for several years that this was a problem and we were trying to figure out how to deal with it. So I'm glad to hear that this is probably the case. Yep, it makes great sense. I'm supportive of it. I can sing this tune. Any other questions? And it's an update, so you don't need action from us.
No action. Nope. The only other thing that I'll add is after we get that letter, then we start a whole other process with the Milwaukee field office, which entails another audit from HUD of all of our public housing accounts, everything. And I'm sure the next time we meet, I'll have a more, hopefully we'll get to that point next time we meet, of a more detailed update on what that'll entail.
Okay. All right. Reports on the housing division, Jefferson Square financial update.
So nothing crazy to report. We are over in 2 areas. This is kind of a holdover from last month as well. It's the plumbing repair and plumbing replacement. The plumbing replacement are mostly toilets. We order 4 to 5 at a time and just kind of have them in stock because when you need a toilet in a 1-bathroom unit, you need a toilet in a 1-bathroom unit. So those just kind of sit in the clubhouse and we wait to use them. The plumbing repairs, we had a leaking toilet and the flange, the PVC that is in the cement slab had broken. We had a plumber come in and replace that. When we replaced a washing machine, the water valve had leaked and they had to go all the way back into the wall and replace the whole valve. So that was part of that. And then the toilets. So that's the explanation for that. Any questions? Unit turnaround is a little high. All that's still from 2023. We carried quite a few over, so we're just working on them now. We only have the 1 empty unit still, so we're pretty much caught up on everything except that one.
Okay. Questions on that? Public housing financial update.
Pretty much steady as she goes here. We did, Jay mentioned that pump last time he was here. we did get that part in. Jay and I talked it through. We spoke with the gentleman and we think it's important to have a redundant system in place that we can rely on because we're going to have the building for another 3 years and that's all the residents' heat. So they did go to put it in and it was the wrong pump. The electrical systems didn't match up, so they had to take it back. It'll be another couple weeks before they can get another one. Jay's monitoring it every morning. He's in there with the grease gun if he needs to have it. It's been holding up pretty good so far. We haven't heard much squeaking. He's had to put some grease in there a couple times here or there, but for the most part, we're doing pretty good there. Otherwise, not much else as far as public housing goes.
Okay. How about update on the housing units?
We are full on public housing. The list continues to grow. I've had a lot of people reach out. I kind of let them know about the pending Section 18 situation and how the wait list, we aren't quite sure what's going to happen to it. So we haven't had a ton of people participate in adding to the list at this point. We've had 2 people call in, which is actually really rare to let them know, hey, I don't no longer want to be on the list. Jefferson Square, we've added 1 person. We did get 752 occupied and we closed on that April 5th. And then we've still got the 720 DeForest Street. We have continued to try to improve marketing. So we put the signs back out. That was our sole marketing strategy back in the day. So that sign is up. And then we have looked at Google further to maybe just increase web traffic. We do find most of the people I talk to when they tour a place, they do say that they found us on Google. If you Google, senior living, retirement communities, anything like that, on Google, we pop up. We're one of the top results. So.
Okay.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
So the 2 units unoccupied in Jefferson Square, is that the 2 that are in the blue section?
So this slide was made before the closing on April 5th.
Okay,
So we only.
so it was those 2. So we're down to 1 then.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Other questions? If not, good work. It's a big job keeping them all up to date and filled. All right, 7.2 redevelopment update.
Not a ton to speak of here, but you'll start to see some of the accounting from the loan program. So aside from that, Carol has set up a couple different accounts for us. So this is actually probably different from the last time that we've looked at it. You can see the grant expenditure here that was associated with the loan. That was the grant portion of that loan. And then obviously up here is the actual loan amount. We have had a little bit more in the contracted services associated with legal fees and mostly legal fees associated with drafting some of the options to purchase. And I think some of that was also associated with the agreement with the village. So the budget for, just to draw your attention to that, since we were just talking about it, the budget for projects this year at 13.5, that's associated with the alleyway. Again, because of the approach that we're taking with some of that, it will likely be coming in significantly under that. So that's good to see too.
Okay. There is no old business or communications I'm aware of, so I would entertain a motion to convene into closed session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Would you take roll call, please?
Commissioner Briggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Wurzba,
Yes.
Commissioner Witherspoon,
Yes.
Commissioner Upadier,
Yes.
Commissioner Buheim,
Yes.
Chairperson Cahill Wolfgram.
Yes. Okay, are we back? All right. If there is no action resulting from closed and no other business to come before the Community Development Authority, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:45 PM. Thank you, everyone.